Our mission: Helping Parents Heal is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting bereaved parents to become shining light parents by providing support and resources to aid in the healing process. We go a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and evidence for the afterlife in a non-dogmatic way. Affiliate groups welcome everyone, regardless of religious or non-religious background. Attendance today at this meeting is voluntary, and we are here for the benefit of learning from and sharing with other parents whose child has passed away. It is understood that our discussions are intended to be confidential and not designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. However, these Zoom meetings are very healing to parents all over the world, and they are posted on YouTube so that affiliate members who are not in our time zone can also watch. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers to allow parents to be informed about many possible ways to heal, to connect with their children, and to learn about the afterlife. The views expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect those of Helping Parents Heal, and we ask that you take from their presentations whatever may benefit you personally. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Wendy, for being here, and thank you so much, Suzanne, for being here also.
We are so grateful to both of you. And I just want to say, first of all, that Suzanne is, as you all know, a huge supporter of Helping Parents Heal. Not only has she been with us from the very beginning, but she also is one of the people who let me know that what I was feeling about Morgan, about that huge hug that he gave me from the inside at the very beginning, was real. And that Chelsea also was responsible for helping me to understand that love lives forever. I feel so grateful to her as well, because she is a huge part of our conferences. She was at the first conference and spoke at the first conference. She also raised money to send over 25 parents to the second conference. And that was something that unfortunately was postponed, but it is only postponed. We are certainly going to be having it soon as we're able to make sure that everyone is vaccinated and that we're able to move forward that way. But I'm going to pass this to Suzanne to be able to introduce Wendy, who is amazing. And actually the first time that I got to meet her and her husband Victor was at the AREI conference when they were winning the lifetime, they were being awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award that night. And so they're amazing. And I know that you'll all love them, but I'm going to let Suzanne introduce them. And thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you, EVB. That's my nickname for her. It's not going away. It's been almost since day one, I think. And when I got your call this afternoon saying, do you think you want to introduce Wendy Zammit? What, she's speaking at your meeting? That's amazing, because Wendy is so very busy facilitating education and meetings all of the time. So let me just tell you a little bit about Wendy Zammit. You were in for a treat. Wendy is not only one of the world's most beloved and most knowledgeable afterlife experts. I would say that, in fact, no one has done more to educate humankind about the survival of consciousness than Wendy and her husband, Dr. Victor Zammit. Wendy has undergraduate degrees in psychology and history and postgraduate degrees in, I think, psychology and history too. She is also a peacemaker. For over 3 decades, she has been an educator with the Alternatives to Violence Project, and they work with clients all over the world. They train the community leaders how to lead experiential workshops to find peaceful ways to settle differences. She's also a pioneer in online education. You guys, we're all here on Zoom, right? But years ago, when it was called in the States, I was at Stanford and a Florida university. We were calling it distance learning. And we had a hard time getting people on board with the fact that, yes, You can deliver quality education online. Remember those days, Wendy?
Absolutely.
Oh boy. But you know, a lot of us climbed that mountain. And Wendy is a communications professional, an author. And the book, if you don't have it, you need to go order it right after this meeting. It's called A Lawyer Presents the Evidence for the Afterlife. And it's pretty much the consummate guide to all of the different categories of survival of consciousness evidence. You heard me mention that she's been an educator, a peacemaker, a communications specialist or professional, but she's also been a professional clinical psychologist. So, you know, are you going to save the earth next, Wendy? And Victor Zammit, you may understand to be the victorzammit.com person, but it's really it's a couple. They are the power couple of the afterlife. And when I say that nobody's done more to educate, I would also tell you that nobody has done more to champion people like me and the work that we do. They've made it easier for us to be able to get through to you. Mediums have no problem getting through to the spirit world, but sometimes we have people that are really afraid to make that connection. And because of the work of people like the Zammits, more and more in this century, this 21st century that we're in, more and more everyone is accepting the fact that you have the ability to make your own direct connection with your own beloveds in spirit if you want to do it. So mediums are just, it's a way to check in, but we want all of you to be able to be mediums for yourself. You don't have to do it for other people, but just for yourself. And so tonight you're in for a treat because you're going to learn about why we know and how we know what we know about the afterlife, the survival of consciousness. Thank you. Hey, Wendy.
Wow. Well, thank you, Suzanne. That's absolutely that's an embarrassing introduction. That's just
I cut it down by 50%.
And thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Irene. And thank you, everybody. I know some of you from the conferences at Scottsdale, and some of you are subscribers to the Friday Afterlife Report, which is lovely. And I'm just going to quickly pin my video so that I've got it here. So, and I must say, I don't ever consider myself an expert in the afterlife. I think it's really important to realize that we are all, what my friend Michael Tim says, we're all blind gropers, which I just love, that we're all trying to piece together little bits of it. But there's nobody on earth who's an expert. And in fact, when we get into even in the afterlife, there's nobody who's an expert on the whole thing, because they're all aware of their own little bit. And that's about all that they're on for. So what I'm going to talk about today, well, first of all, I'm just going to share screen and we'll get to our PowerPoint presentation. And we'll go from the beginning. And I'm sure that most of you are familiar with this little guy or with this kind of person. And of course, as members of Helping Parents Heal, I'm sure that you are aware of the fact that you can communicate with your loved ones. Many of you are getting signs. Some of you are having direct communication. Some of you have done courses on all sorts of things about visualizing, and some of you even having out-of-body experiences and reunions. And that's as it should be. But the majority of people, when you ask them about the evidence for the afterlife, they will say there's no evidence, it doesn't exist. And those that do are usually only aware of two different kinds of evidence. They look first to out-of-body near-death experiences, and then they look at mediums. That's about all that they're aware of. But tonight, I'm going to talk to you about 5 lesser-known sources of evidence that I think are quite exciting and well worth your while to follow up on. So we'll go through the first one. The first one I'd like to talk to you about is independent direct voice. Now, this is really exciting. I've been involved in physical mediumship for many years, and I've experienced the direct voice. And I can tell you it's really quite amazing. Independent direct voice mediums are different to trance mediums. They create, there's very, very few of them. First of all, please don't ask me for the name of a direct voice medium that you can sit with. They're not in the phone book. There's very, very few of them. And I don't know of any who are actually taking sitters from the public. How it's different to trance mediumship, you'll see on the shoulders of these mediums, there is an ectoplasmic voice box. And there are only 3 photos I know that have been able to take photos of these voice boxes in red light, but they're constructed in the same way. And the spirits, these voice boxes are made by the spirit team from a substance in the medium's body that comes from the pancreas. And it's called ectoplasm, and it's very sensitive to light. Now, because of these voice boxes, the people are able to be heard speaking in their own voice. It's not just the voice that's going through the medium, it's their own voice that people can hear. Now, Leslie Flint was unique. There have been a handful of direct voice mediums in the United States. I've got a website called America's Forgotten Direct Voice Mediums, and there's some wonderful, wonderful direct voice mediums. But none of them that I know of are like Leslie Flint, because Leslie Flint took private readings. You could go along every Friday to his readings, book a reading with him, and you could listen to your loved one speaking to you for half an hour. I mean, this is unheard of today. And one of the things let me give you an example of what these tapes are like. Annie Nanji, I think this is probably the best evidence for the afterlife that I know of. Annie Nanji and her husband, Dinshaw Nanji, talked to each other on 66 different occasions for an average of 25 minutes each. This is not just an electronic voice saying, hello, I love you. These were long conversations, intimate conversations, where she's talking about, I saw you doing this today, and I saw you doing that today, and how's Auntie Betty, and how's Flo, and when you come over here. And she talked about how she had been reunited with their 2 young children who had died at birth. And she's talking about what they're doing and what Peter is doing. Let me let you listen to a sample. Oh, sorry, I've just realized I don't think I turned on when I shared screen, I didn't turn on the audio. Start again. Sorry about that. I'm just going to go back to sharing screen. Here we go. Sorry, I'm just going to stop share. I have to do it again. You probably know if you're going to share the audio, you have to click the share computer sound. So there we go. We'll go back to that. Sorry about that. And we'll go back from current slide. I said I wouldn't do this, but here we go.
I think that when we are on Earth, when we think about religion and all that, I think perhaps we have a very strange idea.
Yes.
Now I see so differently, and everything is so beautiful. When you come here, there will be for you a beautiful home. Everything that we love, all the little things that we collect, and there will be the copy, the replica, everything, and we shall have the things that we liked around us.
Yes, darling.
I have got a dog.
Isn't our dog with you, darling?
Of course.
Huh?
Of course.
You know our big black dog?
I have got here. I tell you. And the photograph you have got with me of the dog in the garden.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
That is here with me.
Oh, that's lovely.
And also, you do not remember Polly.
Remember?
Polly.
Holly.
No. Do you remember, perhaps you forget,
Yes.
a long time ago,
Yes.
somewhere where we go,
Yes.
and there was a parrot?
Aha, yes.
You know?
Yes, Papagoya.
That is the word.
Ah.
But I think of it in the English,
Yes,
because
yes.
always we speak in English.
Yes.
And the
Victor
parrot
Zammit
is
2
here.
at
Did you know?
Gmail.
I'm very glad to hear it. It's
Ah, it is so funny that people don't know, you see.
Yeah.
They think animals have no
It's a-
soul, no life.
no.
They think they are of a low origin, you know.
Darling.
Well, they are still little people in a way.
Yes.
They're perhaps not so advanced in some respect,
Yes.
but they have intensity of feeling, they have emotion, they sense things much more than human beings. And here they have life.
Darling, is it a grey parrot with a red tail?
Of course.
As you can see, it's very detailed and very evidential. Now, you can find all of these 66 recordings online. If you go to leslieflint.com and you click on here where it says recordings, you will find all of these are not just individual recordings, these are sets of recordings. And the Annie Nanji tapes are here in the middle, the Annie Nanji seances, there's 66 of them. And they are absolutely incredible, detailed evidence talking about what's happening. The last tape is quite fascinating. Dinshaw is getting older and she's saying, oh, I hope you come over soon. You know, you're too healthy. You're taking too long. You know, there's going to be a big reunion here. And she gives a whole list of all the people who are waiting to meet him. So if you have time, please make time to listen to the Annie Nanji recordings. This is absolutely stunning evidence. Now, there's another set of recordings I want you to listen to, and that is what we call the Woods Greene collection. This is absolutely interesting. What happened was the spirit communicators came through to these two people were friends of Leslie, and they were sitting with him in their weekly seances. And the spirit communicators said that they would bring through people from the highest to the lowest in society. They brought through everybody from Queen Victoria to the composers to the little old lady who was selling flowers in Covent Garden. And they brought through the whole range of society. There are 600 different speakers that they brought through and that we have the recordings of. Now, I'm just going to share one with you. This was an interesting one. George Olsen had been a friend of the circle. He'd actually sat in the circle and he knew them all, and he knew a little bit about the afterlife. And he comes through. Imagine the scene. You've got Leslie who's conscious and he's commenting, and you've got George and the two of them here, Betty and George, and here comes through George Olsen. This is on that site. The tape is an absolute hoot. He claims he wouldn't be dead for quids. He's just so he wouldn't be alive for anything. He's so happy he's dead. And he talks, the tape is about 20 minutes long.
Well, what were your feelings when you first found yourself there?
Well, fortunately, I knew quite a bit about it before I came. That was a great blessing and a great help. Believe me, it was. As far as I'm concerned, the place in which I found myself was, I suppose the nearest one can say is like some country place. Could be anywhere, in a sense. I mean, there were the trees and the birds, and just as if one was waking up in a country village, although in a sense it wasn't a village. I realized that very soon afterwards. Thousands and thousands of people, many, I suppose what you'd call apartment houses. Anyway, I suppose that's what you'd call it. Vast buildings housing thousands of people, and the animals, there seem to be many, many animals, and indeed I realize there are many animals here, particularly in regard to domestic animals, cats and pets and people have had on Earth, you know, that they still have over here.
A very good introduction to the Leslie Flint tapes is this little book called Life After Death by Neville Randall. You can get it in Kindle format. It was reformatted, I think, in 2019. Now, Neville Randall spent 2 years listening to the tapes while they were still on the old reel-to-reel recordings. And you can see on the right some of the things that he picked out, some of the best tapes. So if you're interested in what happens in the afterlife, you might enjoy some of those, reading about them first, and then you can actually listen to them on that website. The next the next source of evidence I'd like to talk to you about is instrumental transcommunication. Now, many of you are familiar with the work of Sonia Rinaldi. In fact, I'm sure some of you might be even amongst the group that had pictures of their loved ones coming through to them. But I'd like you to realize that there are a lot of other people doing instrumental transcommunication all over the world. And there was one very famous group between 1986 and 1992 in Luxembourg. This was Jules and Maggie Harsh-Fischbach, and they were connected with the TimeStream sending station. Now, why I'm including this is that they sent a lot of photos through, not just photos of loved ones, but some of the photos that came through were really, really interesting. You can find these photos on a website called Macy Afterlife, which I'll talk about in a minute. Here's the first photo that I think is quite interesting. These were friends of the experimenters who had died in an accident. And this came through about 6 months after they died, showing that they were together and that they were enjoying swimming in the afterlife. You can imagine what a thrill this would have given to their parents to actually know that they were together and still having a wonderful time. We know that in the afterlife, there are many buildings, and people who've been there say that there are many extravagant buildings. Their imagination goes wild. And this was an image sent through to the TimeStream ITC station from Jules Verne. He said this was his healing place, kind of like a very elaborate hospital that he went to when he first crossed over. One of the interesting things is that people, when they're in the afterlife, they can revert to their prime. I only learnt this recently. This is only people who are in the middle astral level have this privilege. And they can choose to be any age, look any age that they want. Most of them choose between the age of 20 and 30. Some like to be younger. Some like to adopt the persona of a child, and some like to be a wise, look like a wise old man. And one of the things that we do know is that people can change their appearance. You often find that mediums will often say that a child will come through, a child who dies perhaps as an angry adolescent will come through as an 8-year-old child, so that they see them as an 8-year-old child, because this is the time that they were happiest and they had their best connection with their parents. But as you can see, Jules Verne likes to be to present himself as about, I'd say he looks about 40 years old there. And that was him before he died. Another one that they got was by Hanna Buschbeck, who died at the age of 78. And 3 years later, she came through, as you can see on the right. I think she looks about 18 there. So that's something to look forward to. One of the things we also know is that children grow up in the afterlife. For some reason, once they take on an astral body, they have to stay with it. And this is a lovely story of Ezra Braun, who was the child of one of the experimenters. you can see the photo that came through on a grainy television set of him as a young adult. And it was interesting because the parents recognized the satchel on his shoulder. Apparently, they had taken him to China when he was about 10, and he was very interested in the bags that the Chinese kids were wearing during the Cultural Revolution. And he'd got one and he carried it with him everywhere. Well, he still had it with him in the afterlife. Apparently, he was working with the scientist Paracelsus, who was teaching him about biology. And he and Paracelsus would go out collecting specimens, and he would put them in his bag. That all came through. Now, you can read about all of these experiments on macyafterlife.com. Now, I've known Mark Macy, Victor and I have known Mark Macy for nearly 30 years, and I can assure you he is a person of absolute integrity. And he spent a lot of time over in Europe when these experiments were going on. He watched the things coming through, and he had to take a lot of flack. When he was first talking about these in the year 2000, people were very, very skeptical. But he keeps it fairly low key, but he's got a great website where he's got Macy Afterlife. He calls it the Beacon, and he's done a lot of theoretical, philosophical investigation of the mechanisms behind the afterlife. But if you look on the website, you'll find here where he's got trance images and more trance images, and you'll learn a lot more about the afterlife. There's lots of fabulous accounts that came through from the afterlife. Now, our third source that I'm going to look at today is automatic writing, particularly the automatic writing of Chico Xavier. Now, many of you are doing automatic writing yourselves, or you're getting an automatic writing. But where Chico Xavier has credibility is that he channeled 10,000 letters from parents to their from children who had died to their parents. And those letters were in the writing of the child or the writing of the communicator. On 3 occasions, those letters were produced in court and accepted in court as evidence in one case, it was evidence in a murder trial. And the person was exonerated on the basis of the letter that came through from the victim saying it was an accident. He was an incredible medium. Many think he was the best medium and healer who has ever lived. He channeled 450 books by expert writers on a variety of topics. And he sold those books and made millions of dollars, which he dedicated every penny to underprivileged charities. He was running villages, and he was a very spiritual man. But he also channeled 9 books by a Dr. Andre Luiz, a Brazilian doctor, who describes his afterlife journey. And in 2010, a group in Brazil made the biggest movie that has ever been made in Brazil about Andre Luiz's books. It's based on his channeled writings through Chico Xavier. And the movie is called Astral City. Some of you may have seen it. It reinforces the fact that the afterlife is a solid, real world, that people live in houses, they have families, they have relationships. And you can watch this through Amazon Prime or through Gaia. There's a free subscription to Gaia where you can try it out. So if you haven't seen it, go and watch Astral City. These are just a few clips from the movie. They reproduce the healing rooms where people go when if people have been sick, they may need to spend some time in a healing room. They reproduce the cities that people have seen, the halls of learning. Many of our youngsters are attending universities on the other side. They're attending their classes in everything. They're being taught art, music by the originals, by the composers, by wonderful, wonderful art, music, and all sorts of interesting learning going on there. Of course, there are recreational activities as well. Now, the fourth source of evidence that I'd like to talk about is Jurgen Ziewe's work. Jurgen Ziewe is an out-of-body experiencer, but he seems to have gone a lot further than most out-of-body experiences have gone. He has spent 40 years of out-of-body explorations in full waking consciousness, and he's gone to a huge range of places, from the very darkest to the very brightest. And he's written 2 books about his journey. He kept quiet about it, like many people. He kept quiet about it for 35 years. He didn't tell a soul, but he kept his journals of what he'd seen and who he'd interacted with. He was like a reporter. He would go up to people and ask them how things worked. And when his daughter, one of his daughters, found his journals and said, "What are these? What's this all about?" And he started to tell her, and she said, "Well, you really should go and publish these." Now, since then, he's been working on drawings. He's done some magnificent drawings of different things he's seen. But he said he has a lot of trouble drawing the Earth-like astral levels simply because it's so like Earth. He actually asked some of his guides, "How can I get an accurate representation of the place where most of our children live?" And they said, "Open your back door and take a photo of what you see, because that will be a representation of a typical middle astral level." What we hear is it is so like Earth that a lot of people who die don't realize they've died. There are places, there are parks, there are gardens, there are beaches, there are restaurants, there are anything that exists on Earth exists in the astral world. If you can think it, it will exist. Now, what Jurgen is working on at the moment is a series of virtual reality 3-dimensional videos that people can watch in their headsets, which will take them through the different levels in the afterlife, particularly the lower levels and the higher levels, which are different from here on Earth. Jurgen has been doing some talks for us on our Sunday Afterlife Zoom sessions. In fact, what we thought we would do would be give him questions on the afterlife. And each week he comes on and we ask him questions about the afterlife, questions and answers. So he's created a series called Afterlife Answers, which at the moment consists of 26 short videos taken from the sessions. And they cover every question we could think of. How do we dress in the afterlife? What are the love bonds in the afterlife? What are sports in the afterlife? Do they play ball games? And the answer to that is yes, they do play ball games, but they control the ball with their mind. And he gives a lovely story. If you look up part 12 of this, a section called Children in the Afterlife, he talks about the fact that he found himself, he went out of body and he found himself in the middle of a field and he got hit on the head with a ball. And when he was sort of told that he was interrupting their game. And when he went to the side, he was watching it and he was amazed to see that they were controlling the ball with their mind. And he said that it was like 10 times as fast as a game here on Earth. And that's definitely worth watching. Part 12, Children in the Afterlife. Now, one of the things that we need to realize is there is not one afterlife. There are many, many different astral worlds. It's like if you know where you live at the moment, but there is not one place on Earth. If someone asked you, what's life like on Earth? You'd say, well, I know what life is like in Phoenix, or I know what life is like in London, or I know what life is like in Addis Ababa, or I know what life is like in a concentration camp or a refugee camp. But they're all going to be very different. And you have to understand that there is an astral counterpart of every place in the universe. So it gets pretty crowded on the astral level. Um, it's William Buhlman, who's an out-of-body experiencer, talks about going to astral Beijing, and he comes across piles and piles of intensive, low-budget flats, and he finds people living in there, living on rice and tea, as they did when they were alive, because that's their thought creation. They don't realize that they don't need to, that they can go a lot higher. People gather in what they call consensus realities, which seem more real and solid than this world. And they live in dwellings appropriate to that time and place. So when you look at the movie Astral City, you have to realize that the houses they're living in were considered to be very nice houses in Brazil in 1930. And so those houses, to us, when we look at them and say, oh, they're very outdated, the decor is outdated. Well, that's because their conception of their consensus reality is back in the 1930s. The other thing I learnt from Jurgen is that the same city may have several different versions on different vibrational levels. So he talked about going to a low vibrational Berlin, where he saw all of the same places, but then later on another visit, he went to a higher vibrational Berlin, where everything was much nicer and cleaner and more modern. So the areas in the afterlife differ in the amount of light, beauty, and energy. George Meek was a researcher in the 1980s. He's got a great book called After We Die, What Then?, which looks at a lot of the basic evidence for the afterlife. It's definitely worth getting. And he made fairly concrete the difference in levels in the afterlife. Now, these are not rigid levels. What we're talking about is areas. And he talked about the fact that the areas closest to the earth we call the astral planes. You'll hear this word all the time. And you'll hear about the lowest astral planes, the middle astral planes, and the highest astral planes. And each of these differ in the amount of light and the amount of love in those areas. The people who go to the lowest astral plane are the people who are very dark. You can tell some people are very dark in their mind, and in the astral level, our thoughts are manifested in the environment. The average person, and we look at the mix here, the average person, the kind-hearted, considerate, hardworking adults, and all infants and children go to the middle astral planes, because generally these are people who are very joyous. The people who go to the highest astral planes are the people who are living a life of kindness, harmony, love, and service. Now, Jurgen documents these in his talks. He's done some terrifying videos of the lower astral realms, which he sees as very dark and lonely. And you find those, they're very, very moving videos, actually. But as the vibration increases, so the amount of light increases. And you get to areas which are on the edge of the Earth-like astral, which are kind of slummy and run down. But then the people who live there feel more comfortable there. Nobody forces you to go anywhere in the afterlife. You go where you are the most comfortable, and you gravitate to people who are like yourself. We come to the Earth-like realms, and again, as Jurgen says, you can take any picture of Earth and you could find a parallel in the afterlife. He also talks about, as we get up to the middle astral levels, there are fantastic new cities where imagination runs riot. New developments which are well before they're seen here on Earth. In fact, what we're told is that there are groups of scientists in the astral world, medical doctors, scientists, who are working on cures for our diseases. And when they get them and new developments, they had computers there long before we did. once they get the idea, they channel it through to a receptive person in the earth plane. Jurgen says that he's been in 10-star resorts in the middle astral level. He said anything that you could possibly imagine in terms of leisure, tourism, and entertainment exists on the afterlife. In fact, very interesting little anecdote. He was in one of these resorts and he looked at one of the people working as a waiter. And he said when he looked at them, he could tell their whole history. And he saw that this person, when he crossed over, had been in a very low level in the afterlife. He'd been a murderer. He'd been somebody who has had a lot of evil intent. But he'd gradually worked his way up. And they had put him into this job as a waiter so that he could learn the joy of serving others. And that was part of his rehabilitation. When we get to the higher astral worlds, think of the movie Avatar, because what Jurgen says happens there is that you are in you have a sense of communication with all that is, and the plants talk to you. He says that there is, think of the best place on earth, and this is like 1,000 times better. He said there's such an energy of love and connection, and I think this is when we hear people who've had a near-death experience talking about this kind of experience. I think this is where they're visiting. They're not visiting the astral realms where people are very solid and have bodies and go about their business very like they do on earth. This is like what we call the higher realms of the astral. Jurgen talks about the colors and sounds being beyond anything that we can experience here on earth. And he tried to convey that in this video of the beginnings of the mental realms, which are beyond the astral. It's a lot to take in, but I would strongly recommend that you do follow up the work of Jurgen Ziewe and the other out-of-body experiences. I think the afterlife explorers have been doing, afterlife researchers have done a disservice not to be looking at the work of the out-of-body experiences, because there is now such a crossover between them. Now, my last source that I'd like you to know about is the work of Michelle Szabo and Dennis Grega. Some of you might have seen them do a presentation at one of the afterlife conferences, but they've gone on to do a lot more work since then. They have a program, they have actually 4 programs, 4 different websites with different aspects of the work. This one, the first one is called Voices Across the Veil. And what they provide in Voices Across the Veil is online readings with a tested medium. They realize that a lot of bereaved parents are reluctant, don't know how to find a medium, or they're reluctant to spend a lot of money when they don't know about the quality of the medium. So here, what they're offering is a guaranteed, a tested medium, and a group of 5 to 6 people who sign up for a group reading. They share the cost, every person spends $40. And as part of the research, they're interviewed before and after the reading, before the group reading. Dennis interviews each person, asks them who they're hoping to contact, and afterwards getting feedback on the accuracy of the reading, and also on any information about the afterlife that they gained from the reading. And those materials about the afterlife are added to their research bank. Another good thing about Voices Across the Veil is that there's very short waiting time. You can usually get into a group within a month or so. The second program that they're doing is something called direct personal communication. Now, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the work of Rochelle Wright with her EMDR, after-death communications. Now, the only problem during the pandemic is that you have to be able to travel to Greg Harbor, where she lives, and they often take all day. Now, what Dr. Jane Bissler is doing is she is creating online sessions using EMDR, which take 2 hours, and in the 2 hours, 95% of people are successful in learning how to make ongoing contact with a loved one. This is fantastic work, and next Sunday in our Afterlife Global Gathering, she will be doing a presentation on her most recent results. So that is the Voices Across the Veil direct personal communication. Their third project is what's called Afterlife Data. And they have done the research of researching some 3,000 books and compiling the best evidence on a variety of topics to answer 216 questions that people have about the afterlife. They've looked at some of the most reliable sources to compile the answers, and they found 95% agreement between those sources. So if you go to Afterlife Data, you will find, you can look up answers about the afterlife. Once they had found the books, they put them into another site which they created called Afterlife Library. So if you go to the Afterlife Library, which is connected to Afterlife Data, you will find a whole range of books on various aspects of the afterlife that you might like to look at. So going back, just to recapitulate, what we have looked at is 5 sources: direct voice mediumship and the Leslie Flint tapes, instrumental transcommunication, particularly the harsh fishback and time stream photos. We've looked at the automatic writing of Chico Xavier and the movie Astral City. And we've talked about the out-of-body experiences of Jurgen Ziewe and the work of Michelle Szabo and Dennis Grega, comparing evidence from multiple sources. So this is kind of information that we put out every week in the Friday Afterlife reports, not in such a big block as this. I realize that I've given you a big data dump, and perhaps it's something that's a lot in it's kind of like a 7-course meal instead of a nice little snack. So I'm hoping that you will take the time to follow up and investigate some of these sources. And if you don't, just subscribe to the Friday Afterlife Report, where you'll get it in small bites. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for your attention. And I think I might have gone a little bit over time. I'm sorry about that.
Not
Elizabeth.
at all. Oh my goodness. Everyone is saying that they're completely blown away. Thank you. This is completely wonderful information. Amazing. We have people saying this is also amazing and thought-provoking. Candy is saying that she only wants to go to the high vibration place, LOL, which is, I think, what all of us want. And there are also people who are sharing. We have a mom who's sharing that her son, Jaden, always believed in a parallel universe. What he believed people referred to as heaven. This world had everything we have here, except there was only good and love. No illness, no hate. He talked of this place as if he knew it, which is very interesting.
Which he did. It's where he came from.
It's where he came from and where he returned. And
where he came from, and they all talk about going home.
Yes, and it's interesting. We have one person who's asking about, well, Carrie is saying, my oldest told me via a medium that she looked forward to going back to school, which is exactly what you're talking about as well. But we have one mom who's saying, do they have money? How do they have homes, etc.? Maybe you could just answer that question quickly.
Actually, it's quite interesting. On the lowest level, they do seem to have money. And they don't know how they have money. It just seems to appear. It's kind of like, I need some money, and they'll reach into their pocket. On the lowest levels, how do houses appear? They have to be created by thought form, and they actually have people who are specialists in. They have architects and they have builders, but they build the things with their thoughts. So a group of them will get together and they will visualize the basement of how it works. Perhaps the best description of this is, there's a book called Life in the World Unseen by was transmitted through a medium called Anthony Borgia, and they talk a lot in that about the building process. It's absolutely fascinating. Jurgen's books are great. If you like to read Jurgen's books, a lot depends on the mental construct. There's a fascinating section in his book where he goes to an office building where people are doing boring, mundane work. And he's saying, what are you doing here in this office building? What are you doing? What's the purpose of this work? They say, oh, we've got to work. And they think that they're doing something productive. It's because they're in that mental mindset. There are people in the afterlife who are going to factories and working in factories because they think they have to. And Jurgen was saying to people, come on, there are much more beautiful areas in the afterlife. What are you doing in this crummy little office building? You could be out exploring the whole universe. Well, I guess the same thing happens to people on Earth. You talk to people who are addicted to watching reality television, and you say to them, what are you doing watching this rubbish on TV? You could be learning so many things, but they say, no, look, this is what I'm happy doing. This is where I'm comfortable. There's a lot to explore in, there's a lot to get across in a very short time, but I can assure you that the information is out there.
It's amazing. And I just have a very important question. And I think that this is a question that everyone is asking tonight. And that is, what happens when we cross over and our children are on a different level? Could you maybe speak to that?
Well, it's one of the things Jurgen says is that we are multiple personalities. Like we have multiple selves. He calls himself a multidimensional man. And he actually says it is possible when you cross over to meet your child as they were when they left. And you can be living and reliving the years that you missed out on with that child, while another part of that child is actually on another level exploring. It's hard for us to get our heads around, but he also talks about the fact there is part of us which is always in the afterlife. We are multidimensional beings. And he learnt this himself when he went to one of the realms, and he found he had a house there, which he didn't know about. And in the house were all of these paintings, which he didn't know he'd done. And when he looked at the brushstroke of every paint, because he doesn't paint here, he does computer art, but when he looked at the brushstrokes, he could remember every brushstroke in the painting. And from that, he realized that he's actually living, part of him is actually living a parallel life there. So it's all, once you get into this whole philosophy aspect, it's much more complex than we believe. There is no time, and everything is expanded over there. So just take it on faith that you're not going to miss out on anything with your children. You will be able to re-experience all of the things that you did miss out on.
That's beautiful. And Candy is saying that explains reincarnation then. We can be in multiple places. I
Absolutely.
think that one of the things that I've experienced that I love the most is spending time with my kids when I sleep. And I think that many times I'm spending time with them and I don't even realize it. And I wake up and I just feel great because I've experienced something wonderful with them.
We all go out of our bodies every night. That's the whole thing. And there's part of us that never goes, that's never been in body. Think of the movie Avatar, where you've got Jake is here, physically here, but his avatar is over there. We are the avatar of ourselves, of our higher selves. So it's much more complex than we realize.
Well, and Caroline explaining the brushstrokes is saying it's like deja vu, which I think you would probably agree that this is many times we experience these things in our daily lives that we realize that we've done this before, but we don't know when. So this is fascinating. You have given us so many resources, Wendy. Obviously, it's going to take a lot of time to wade through all of this and be able to watch all of these movies and be able to go to all of these websites that you've mentioned, as well as the books.
But
I'm
if anyone's interested, what would be really good is if somebody set up a little group to explore the Leslie Flint tapes. Say, okay, this week we're going to look at the first tape in Annie Nanji tapes. Next week we're going to look at this tape. You know, kind of like a book club, but with tapes.
That sounds wonderful.
Or you could do the same thing with Jurgen Ziewe's videos. He's got so many video talks up there on YouTube, and work your way through the Afterlife Answers series. There's so much material out there that people are not aware of. There's so much on the internet if you know where to look, but most people don't know where to look.
Well, this sounds very exciting. I think we could have an affiliate group that explores all of those different videos, as well as all of the different books, and that would be very exciting. I just want to mention, Carrie is saying, always in the early morning, I go into a light sleep where, and that is where I find that they visit me, her child, as well as many others that she doesn't know. But I think that it's true that in the early morning, when you are just waking, is when we're most open to visits. Would you say that that's true?
Absolutely. That happens all the time. People say that, yeah.
Which is
beautiful. And the other time is often when you're driving a car, because your conscious mind is engaged. Has anyone had an experience like that when you're driving in a car? Yeah,
I think everybody's had that. Yes, of course. Just because we're not thinking,
you're no longer thinking. Your sort of conscious mind is engaged in where you're going, but you're on autopilot. You kind of, we should call it the meditation of driving the car.
Yes, and we don't have very much time left, but I want to tell you that Kimbra is saying, please come back. This was a wonderful meeting. My favorite thus far. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of the information you gave us. Great info. Thank you. So this is someone else. I learned so much tonight. Thank you for sharing so much great information. I would love to be a part of this group that you're talking about. How can we start? I will facilitate one. So Marilyn is saying that. Thank you so much, Wendy. Thank you for such amazing information. Iris is saying loved tonight. So I will definitely send you this chat box so that you can maybe see what everyone is saying, because I won't be able to tell you everything. Could you maybe just give us some parting thoughts? That would be so helpful.
Well, the parting thought is it's all even far more wonderful. I'm just thinking of Montague Keen when he died. Montague Keen was an afterlife explorer that we love, and he's very much into it. And when he died, he came through very, very quickly through a medium that I was with, David Thompson. And he said, I was wrong about the afterlife. It's so much better than I could even have imagined. And I think if you keep that thought in mind, it is everything I've learned. It's absolutely incredible. And our children are with us all the time. Absolutely. There is no separation. And it's just, we need to get this message out to people. There is so much unnecessary grief. Of course you miss their physical presence. It's as if I miss my daughter who's been living in America. My only child has lived in America for the last 20 years. I do miss her. But it's kind of like if your children have gone off, I say, look, it's like, imagine your child has gone off to the best university in the world, where they're being taught by the absolute best people, the top people, and they're having an amazing, wonderful time. So it's not like, don't feel negative about it. It really is, they're having an amazing time with amazing people around them. My friend Karen Jarvie had a reading with a medium the other day, a good friend of hers, and her daughter came through and said, oh, sorry, Mum, I've got to go. I've got a science lecture. This is in the middle of the reading. It's like hello, Mum. But that's what it's like. They're busy. They've got things to do. They've got amazing opportunities.
They do have many things to do. And I think that one of the biggest things that I love is that they're all friends. And I know that they bring all of their parents to us, and they bring us together so that we can be a big family now as well.
Totally. And they all love it. You can, and I can guarantee there'd be a lot of them on this call. So when we do, I don't know if you noticed it, but when we do these tapes, we often find EVPs embedded in the audio.
Oh, we've never tried that, but I know that they're here with us. They're here all the time. I can feel them. My ears ring from the start of the meeting till the end of the meeting. So I know that they're here with us. So it is very clear to me, at least, and I think it's clear to everyone that our kids are with us. And it's so wonderful to hear you tell us about all of this evidence for the afterlife. And so many things are being written in the chat box right now, as I say, about how beautiful this presentation is, about how these things have happened to these parents, and so many other people telling us how they loved this presentation. I just want to make sure to get this chat box to you, but also to possibly have you back again so that people will be able to ask more questions next time. And thank you so much for coming, though.
Yes.
And thank you,
Thank you,
Suzanne,
Wendy.
as
Thank
well.
you so much.
Thank
We
you,
really
everybody. Thank you.
appreciate it. We always ask everyone to unmute
so
themselves.
very much.
Thank
Thank you,
Thank
Wendy.
you.
Thank
you.
Thank you, Wendy. That was awesome. I loved it.
Thank you.
Love it.
Very much.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elizabeth and Irene.
Thank you so much.
Night,
It was
everybody.
great.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Irene. And thank
Have
you,
a wonderful
Suzanne.
evening.
Okay.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
See everybody
Bye-bye,
soon.